cleared Utopia Planitia.
Shack to engineering. We've cleared the slip and are ready to set sail, Mr. Morph.
What the hell? Status report. Hull breaches. All decks.
Most of you guys watching right now probably know me from my Star Citizen content, but once upon a time, some of you will probably remember that I played Space Engineers a lot. It was the game that I called home. It's a truly open-world sandbox, single-player, and multiplayer game where you could build spaceships, space stations, ground bases, pretty much anything you wanted, all while exploring, and even tell your own story using their tools, which is where I think my passion for making content really started. It's hard to believe then that it's been almost 10 years since the game's first release, which is why I think Keen Software House, the guys who made the original, thought it was high time to bring out a new sequel for a whole new generation of gamers. They're calling it Space Engineers 2. Now you can get it right now on Steam if you like, but before you break out your wallet, there's something you gotta know. It's currently in a vertical slice alpha release format, which means it's just a peek at what they're looking to do with the game, which is to build upon what's already there and make a much better, more polished and modern experience for a whole new audience. They've got a plan to release it in segments to lead up to the full game release, where we'll be able to get bits and pieces of what the original game had, plus a lot of the improvements that they want to do, but the first slice that's already there already has some pretty great stuff, including all the improvements they've made to the physics engine over the years. The developer who was working on this posted some comparisons with other engines like Unreal Engine and Unigine to show how much of a difference it makes to not have to deal with what they call phantom forces with dealing with constraints. You can see here how well it works. It's incredibly impressive. When I saw this side by side a couple years ago, I was blown away. This is really important for Space Engineers because, as you might guess, it's an engineering game and a lot of the things you're building is, well, engineering with like rotors and hinges. It can get pretty complex. I myself have built a few of them over the years in the original game. And together with their new V-Rage 3 engine, they've been able to pull off some pretty spectacular results, like physicalizing water and making it react to voxel changes on planets, which is going to make for some really interesting builds when this gets implemented in a future vertical slice. You can see here it being tested in the original version of Space Engineers. This is not public, this was from one of the developers who was posting it on Twitter. And these improvements also extend to the way that planets are generated, making for far more realistic and detailed looking planet surfaces, which are going to make Space Engineers planets actually look like some of the best in the entire industry, not to mention that you can actually deform these and make them your own, unlike I think any other game. And as you may have already guessed, it also includes ray tracing, which is currently running on the one that you can play right now as the vertical slice. You can see here at Green Base how good it looks to have real ray casting happening and how it bounces light up on surfaces in a much more natural looking way. It really makes things feel like they're within the world, they're planted and they're real. And here in my ship that I built for the video, you can see how much of a difference it can make when you're trying to light the interior of a ship. I put lights on the other side of a grate to cast cool rays through it. And you can see this is just something that you couldn't do without ray tracing in the original version of the game. It's gonna make for some wild looking builds. And of course it makes the environments so much more immersive and atmospheric, even in some cases without intending to do so. Lighting really does make such a big difference in how good a game can look. Another big improvement from the original game is them unifying the grid system. You might notice on this ship that I built that there's a bunch of little details on it, and it's combining different block sizes like large blocks, small blocks, and even now what they're calling detail blocks to allow you to really get crazy with them. I won't deny that I'm a little bit rusty, but I can already see the potential for how much you can do with this small but significant change to the building block system. Which is why it's such a shame that the workshop is not currently part of this first vertical slice, because I would have loved to see what the community has been able to build so far with this change. They also have a very cool new copy paste and precision mode that allows you to select specific segments of your build to be able to copy and paste them to expand details across the surface of a build that you've made, or even save segments as a blueprint so that you can use them on future builds. It's such a good example of how they've learned from the original game and created tools to just make our creative process so much easier. I can imagine myself spending hours creating prefabricated interior pieces to be able to use for larger builds to expedite the time it takes, like you might do in a real world project where you design segments and then have them manufactured. And of course, no build would be complete without the physics engine that made destruction so much fun in the original. It's basically the same as what we had, but probably improved in some performative ways that are not obvious right now in this build. I can't wait to have it be multiplayer so I can test this a bit more thoroughly and really figure out what the limitations are of the new engine. Either way, it looks glorious and runs really well, but I guess it's what happens after 10 years of hardware development and being able to hone in your engine to make it this performant. But I don't want to misrepresent where Space Engineers 2 is right now. Like I said, it's very much in a vertical slice state. What's available here is a limited selection of blocks and things that you can do without a lot of the features that we've come to appreciate in the current modern version of Space Engineers. There are no rotors or no conveyor blocks, there's no survival mode. A lot of the blocks that are in-game right now don't have functionality, like for example the doors don't open or close and they're not interactable. There's no grouping for items within a grid after you've created them, so it can be kind of hard to modify, say, lighting to different colors. There's a lot of little stuff like this. Again, it's very, very much a vertical slice. What this is then is a way for them to gather feedback on some of the new features they've added on top of the original ones that were in the original game, for them to understand some of the bugs and imperfections so they can work to fix them as they add in some of the more complex mechanics to the Re-Rage 3 engine as they port them over. I don't know the specifics on how many of the features they're able to directly port, but knowing that it's based off the same engine and they've worked on it in-house, it shouldn't be too complex for them to do it, but it seems that it will take time. The good news is that Keen has a really good track record when it comes to supporting their products. Space Engineers has continued to be updated up until even this week, while they've also been working on Space Engineers 2. So I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to see some consistent and regular updates for these vertical slices going forward into this year. But I'm really excited to keep following Space Engineers. You can definitely expect to see a few more videos going forward as they introduce more features into the game. I'm excited to see what happens with the workshop and if you can port over some builds from the original game and when we're going to start to see those planets come in, because for me, those were the more exciting places to build things and fly around and explore in. So I really want to hopefully see a date at some point for when we might expect to see it this year, towards the end of the year, or if it's going to bleed into the next year. I'm also looking forward to see how they improve the multiplayer component of the game, because it's always struggled a bit with the original in terms of how big the servers could be before stuff started to fall apart, like having physics issues or desync problems. So yeah, are you guys excited like I am about this game? I'm certainly going to be spending a bit more time with it to figure out how I can properly leverage the new detail blocks to really make some snazzy interiors. I feel like I've only just scratched the surface with it. But anyway guys, let me know what you guys think down below, and if you got some crazy builds, you can link me on Twitter, send me some photos of what you guys have been building. But that's it for now. I gotta get back to doing some proper organizing and unpacking.